Hello. The first time I saw her, I thought she looked like a character from one of those old black and white thrillers, the kind where the villain hides behind a charming smile. Her name was Margaret, but she insisted I call her Maggie. Formalities are for strangers, dear, she'd said, her voice honeyed, but with an edge that made my skin prickle. Ethan had told me she was his grandmother, visiting from Sarasota to spend the holidays with us. But nothing about her felt grandmotherly. Ethan had been acting strange for weeks before her arrival. He'd started working late, his texts grew vague, and he'd developed a habit of staring at his phone with a tense jaw, as if willing it not to ring. When I asked him about it, he'd brush me off with a kiss and a joke about end-of-year work chaos. But I knew him too well. Something was off the day Maggie arrived. The air turned brittle with cold, the sky a slate-gray sheet threatening snow. Ethan had left work early to pick her up from the airport, which surprised me. He'd never been the type to prioritize family. When they walked through the door, her presence filled the room like smoke. She was tall for her age, her posture unnervingly straight, her silver hair styled in a sleek bob that framed a face too sharp, too alive, for someone in their 70s. Her eyes, pale blue, almost translucent, scanned our apartment like she was appraising it for flaws. "So this is your little love nest," she said, her tone teasing but her gaze lingering too long on the framed photo of us on the mantel. Ethan laughed, too loudly. "Grandma, this is Emily. This is Maggie." I reached out to shake her hand, but she pulled me into a hug instead, her perfume cloying, jasmine and something darker, like burnt vanilla. "Charmed," she whispered, her breath warm against my ear. Over the next few days, Maggie settled into our home like a cat claiming territory. She rearranged the kitchen cabinets, criticized my coffee. "Too weak, darling. Life's too short for timidity," and left lipstick-stained wine glasses scattered around the living room. Ethan, usually so independent, orbited her like a moon. He'd laugh at her stories, tales of her youth that sounded more like fiction than memory, and fetch her blankets before she even asked. Once, I caught him massaging her shoulders while she sipped bourbon, her eyes closed in a way that made my stomach twist. "She's just lonely," he said later, when I mentioned how close they seemed. "Her husband died last year. Cut her some slack, okay?" But it wasn't jealousy I felt. It was unease. A slow, creeping dread that worsened every time Maggie's laughter echoed down the hall. Too bright, too knowing. The first crack in the facade came on the third night. Ethan had gone to the store for wine, leaving me alone with Maggie. She sat cross-legged on the couch, her nails, painted blood red, tapping against her glass. "You're very quiet, Emily," she said, her eyes narrowing. "Do I make you nervous?" "No," I lied, forcing a smile. "Just tired. Work's been hectic." She leaned forward, her gaze piercing. "You know, Ethan's always been drawn to strong women. His mother was a force of nature. Shame she passed so young." The comment felt deliberate, a needle disguised as small talk. "He doesn't talk about her much," I said carefully. "No," Maggie replied, her lips curving into a smirk. "He prefers to live in the present." The front door opened then, saving me from responding. Ethan walked in, cheeks flushed from the cold, and Maggie's demeanor shifted instantly. Her sharpness softened, her smile widening into something almost maternal. But I'd seen the flicker of triumph in her eyes. By the end of the week, the tension in the house was suffocating. Ethan started sleeping on the couch, claiming Maggie's snoring kept him awake. But I'd wake in the dead of night to whispers in the hallway, their voices a low hum that stopped the moment I stirred. Once, at 3 a.m., I crept to the kitchen for water and found Maggie at the table, her robe slipping off one shoulder, Ethan standing too close as he handed her a pill bottle. "Migraines," he muttered when he saw me, his voice tight. "She gets them sometimes." Maggie just smiled, popping the pill into her mouth without water. The breaking point came on a snowy Saturday morning. Ethan had left for the gym, and Maggie was napping, though I'd never actually seen her sleep. I decided to tidy the bedroom, desperate for a distraction. As I vacuumed under the bed, the nozzle caught on something. I reached down and pulled out a crumpled condom wrapper. My blood turned to ice. Ethan and I hadn't used condoms in months. We'd gotten tested together, talked about trust, about commitment. I stood there, staring at the wrapper, my mind racing. Then I noticed something else. A faint smear of red lipstick on the edge of our bedsheet, the same shade Maggie wore, the lipstick. It was undeniably the same shade, a brazen, unapologetic red that Maggie favored, a stark contrast against the pale cream of our sheets. My hands trembled as I picked up the wrapper again, turning it over and over as if it held the answer to some twisted riddle. Condom. Here. In our bed. With her lipstick, the silence in the apartment was thick, broken only by the hum of the refrigerator and the distant drone of traffic. Maggie was still supposedly asleep. Or pretending to be. The thought sent a fresh wave of nausea through me. This couldn't be happening. It was grotesque, impossible. Ethan and his grandmother. My mind reeled, trying to make sense of the senseless. Ethan's strange behavior, Maggie's invasive presence, the hushed whispers in the hallway, the pill bottle, the intimacy I'd witnessed. It all coalesced into a sickening, terrifying picture.
But why?
What possible motive could there be? Panic began to claw at my throat. I had to get out of this room, out of this apartment. But where could I go? And what about Ethan? Was he complicit? A victim? Or something even more sinister? Taking a shaky breath, I carefully smoothed out the bedsheet, trying to hide the lipstick stain as best as I could. The condom wrapper I slipped into my pocket, a tangible piece of evidence, a cold weight against my thigh. I had to think, to plan. But my thoughts were a chaotic whirlwind of disbelief and fear. Quietly, I left the bedroom, closing the door behind me with a soft click. The living room was empty, bathed in the pale winter light filtering through the window. It looked deceptively normal, almost peaceful. But I knew better now. Beneath the surface of this carefully curated domesticity, something rotten festered. I needed to find out the truth. And I needed to do it without alerting either of them. My eyes scanned the room, landing on Maggie's handbag, carelessly tossed on the armchair. It was a rich, burgundy leather, slightly out of place amidst our minimalist decor. Intuitively, I knew that bag held something. Answers, maybe. Or, at least more clues. My heart pounded against my ribs as I approached the armchair. It felt like stepping into a minefield. What if Maggie wasn't really asleep? What if she was watching me, waiting, taking another deep breath? I reached for the bag. It was surprisingly heavy. I hesitated for a moment, guilt and fear warring within me. Snooping through someone's belongings felt wrong, invasive. But this wasn't just someone. This was Maggie. And this was about my life, my relationship, my sanity. With trembling fingers, I unclasped the bag. The scent of jasmine and burnt vanilla wafted out, stronger now, almost suffocating. Inside, nestled amongst a silk scarf and a worn leather wallet, was a small, velvet pouch. It was drawn shut with a thin cord. My fingers fumbled with the cord, my breath held captive in my chest. What was inside? Jewelry? More pills? Something worse? Finally, the pouch yielded, opening to reveal its contents. My breath hitched. Inside, nestled on a bed of crimson velvet, was a photograph. I carefully lifted it out. It was old, faded, black and white. And it was a picture of Ethan. But not the Ethan I knew. This Ethan was younger, maybe in his late teens, his face thinner, his eyes wider, somehow vulnerable. He was standing next to a woman with sharp features, silver hair styled in a sleek bob, and pale, almost translucent eyes, Maggie. But younger. Much younger. And different. There was a vitality in her eyes in this picture, a raw energy that was both captivating and unsettling. She looked powerful, predatory, and utterly, undeniably familiar. My blood ran cold. This wasn't a grandmother and grandson picture. This was something else entirely. The way they stood, close but not touching, the intensity in their gazes. It was charged, electric, illicit. My mind raced, desperately trying to reconcile this image with the reality I thought I knew. Ethan had told me his mother had died young. Maggie had mentioned it too, that first night. Shame she passed so young. But what if they had lied? What if Maggie wasn't his grandmother at all? The photograph slipped from my numb fingers, falling back into the velvet pouch. The truth, or a terrifying fragment of it, was beginning to surface. And it was far more twisted and disturbing than I could have ever imagined. Just then, I heard a sound. A soft creak from the hallway. Maggie. She was awake. And I was caught, red-handed, rummaging through her bag. Panic surged through me, cold and sharp as shattered glass. I had to think fast. Very fast. The jasmine and burnt vanilla, now thick and suffocating, no longer felt alluring, but like a suffocating shroud. My carefully constructed lie hung in the air, flimsy and pathetic. I braced myself for the inevitable explosion, the accusation, the wrath. But it didn't come instead. Maggie just continued to look at me, her pale eyes unblinking. A slow, almost imperceptible smile began to curve her lips. It wasn't a warm smile, or a friendly one. It was calculating. Like a predator admiring its trapped prey. Put my bag back, she repeated, her voice soft, almost amused. Oh, Emily, darling. You wound me with your lack of imagination. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic drumbeat against the sudden, chilling calm in her voice. I swallowed hard, trying to regain some semblance of composure. It's the truth, I insisted, my voice barely a whisper. I just saw it on the floor. Maggie tilted her head again, her silver bob swaying slightly. And you just had to open it? To make sure it wasn't dangerous? Perhaps it contained a bomb? Or poison? The last word dripped with a theatrical irony that made my skin crawl. No, I protested, perhaps too vehemently. I just wanted to see if there was anything I could put away for you. Like your glasses, maybes? Desperation fueled my increasingly ridiculous excuses. Her smile widened, a flash of teeth that seemed a bit too sharp. My glasses? Darling, I don't wear glasses. Haven't needed them since I was 20. Excellent genes, you see. She tapped her temple with a long, blood-red nail. Or perhaps excellent luck. The way she said luck sent another shiver down my spine. It wasn't luck. It was something else, something darker, that emanated from her like a palpable aura. She took another step closer, and I instinctively backed away, bumping into the arm of the armchair. Trapped. I was cornered, both literally and figuratively. Tell me, Emily, she said, her voice dropping to a low, conspiratorial murmur. What were you really looking for? Her gaze pierced me, delving into my soul, demanding the truth, the real truth, buried beneath layers of fear and denial. I knew then that lies wouldn't work. She saw right through them. She had probably seen through me from the moment she walked into our apartment, but could I tell her the truth? The whole truth? That I suspected her of what? Of some unspeakable intimacy with Ethan? Of something even more sinister implied by that photograph, by her youthful appearance in it. Fear held my tongue. But silence was also dangerous. It would only confirm her suspicions. I needed to find a middle ground, a carefully crafted half-truth that would appease her, or at least buy me some time. I found a condom wrapper, I blurted out, the words tumbling out in a rush. My cheeks flushed crimson, shame and humiliation mixing with the fear. In the bedroom. And a lipstick on the sheet. Red lipstick. Like yours. Maggie's reaction was not what I expected. She didn't gasp or feign shock or explode in anger. Instead, her smile deepened, morphing into something almost gleeful. Ah, she said, drawing out the sound as if finally understanding a long-pondered riddle. So, the little detective in you finally came out to play. And you jumped to conclusions? Conclusions? I echoed, my voice trembling. What else am I supposed to conclude? Ethan's been acting strangely. You two are too close, and then I find that in our bed. My voice trailed off, the implications too horrifying to articulate fully. Maggie chuckled, a low, throaty sound that resonated with an unnerving amusement. My dear Emily, she said, taking another step closer. You have such a pedestrian imagination. Is that all you think this is about? Simple infidelity. Her words hung in the air, laden with a weight that made my stomach clench.
Pedestrian?
What did she mean? Was she implying that it was something worse? What else could it be? I whispered, my voice barely audible. Maggie leaned in closer still, her breath warm and jasmine-scented against my ear. "Oh, Emily," she murmured, her voice now a silken whisper. "You have barely scratched the surface of what's really going on here." Infidelity? That's child's play. We're talking about something far, far more interesting than that. Her words were like ice water poured down my spine. More interesting? What could be more interesting than your fiancé possibly sleeping with his grandmother? Unless she wasn't his grandmother at all. Unless that photograph. My eyes darted to her handbag, still clutched in my trembling hand. The velvet pouch, the photograph, it all pointed to something twisted, something deeply wrong. "The picture," I said, my voice regaining a sliver of strength, fueled by a sudden surge of adrenaline. "In your bag." The black and white photo. "Who is that woman?" Maggie's smile widened into a full, predatory grin. You found the little souvenir, did you? Clever girl. I always did underestimate your curiosity." She reached out, her long, blood-red nails brushing against my hand, sending a jolt of electricity through me. She didn't try to take the bag, just let her fingers linger for a moment, a possessive, chilling touch. "That woman, Emily," she said, her voice now dangerously soft, "is family, in a manner of speaking. And Ethan, well, Ethan has always been drawn to family. Haven't you noticed? Family." She kept using that word. But there was nothing familial about the way she looked at Ethan, about the tension that crackled between them, about the condom wrapper in our bed. "Family?" I repeated, my voice laced with disbelief. "You expect me to believe that? After everything?" Maggie laughed again, a brighter, sharper sound this time, like glass shattering. "Believe what you want, darling. But you're playing a dangerous game, Emily. Prying into things that are best left undisturbed." She took a step back, finally breaking the suffocating closeness. She straightened her robe, her movements graceful and deliberate. The predatory smile remained on her lips, but now it was tinged with something else, something that made my blood run even colder. "Warning, now," she said, her voice regaining its honeyed edge. "Why don't you put my bag back where you found it, and we'll forget this little misunderstanding ever happened. Shall we?" Her eyes bored into mine, a silent command, a veiled threat. I knew, with a chilling certainty, that this wasn't a request. It was an order, and disobeying Maggie, I sensed, would have consequences far more terrifying than I could even imagine. Slowly, numbly, I did as she said. I placed her bag back on the armchair, my hands still trembling. I avoided her gaze, focusing on the mundane task, trying to appear compliant, subservient. When I was done, I stepped back, my heart still pounding, my mind reeling. Maggie watched me, her pale eyes like chips of ice. "Good girl," she purred, her voice laced with a chilling satisfaction. "Now, why don't you go make us some of that weak coffee of yours? I think we both need a little fortification, don't you?" And with that, she turned and glided back down the hallway, leaving me standing there, alone in the living room, with the weight of her unspoken threats and the terrifying implications of that photograph crushing down on me. The game, I realized with a sickening lurch in my stomach, was far from over. It had only just begun, and I was playing against an opponent far more dangerous, far more cunning than I could have ever anticipated. The word fortification hung in the air, heavy with unspoken meaning. It wasn't just about coffee. It was about bracing myself for something more, something else Maggie had planned. I nodded slowly, a mechanical movement, my mind still racing, trying to process the rapid-fire revelations and veiled threats. "Of course," I managed to say, my voice sounding strangely hollow even to my own ears. "Coffee. Right away." I turned towards the kitchen, my legs feeling strangely heavy, as if wading through treacle. Each step was a conscious effort, each movement observed, judged, by Maggie's unseen eyes. I could feel her presence behind me, a silent shadow. Even though I knew she hadn't physically moved once in the kitchen, the mundane act of making coffee felt surreal, disconnected from the terrifying reality that had just unfolded. The familiar scent of brewing coffee, usually comforting, now seemed almost mocking in its normality. Life in this apartment was anything but normal. It was a meticulously crafted facade, and I was starting to see the cracks in the veneer, the darkness lurking beneath. My hands trembled as I measured out the coffee, the spoon clattering against the ceramic container. I glanced back towards the living room doorway, half expecting to see Maggie standing there, watching me. But the doorway was empty. The silence was broken only by the gentle gurgle of the coffee machine. Think, Emily, think, I urged myself, trying to push past the fear and confusion. What did I know for sure? And that's the end of today's story. If you enjoyed this journey, please give this video a thumbs up and don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more incredible stories like this one. Got thoughts or experiences you'd like to share? Drop them in the comments. I'd love to hear from you. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Take care.
Bye.